And thanks for joining us for WNY News Now as we continue our election coverage, spotlighting candidates running for office. Joining us today is Richard Moon, who's running for the new 23rd Congressional District. Rich, thank you so much for coming into our studio here in Jamestown to talk more about your campaign and where you stand.
Oh, it's a pleasure. This will be fun.
I want to first give you a chance to introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure.
Who are you and why are you running for Congress?
Well, you said my name, so that's most of the introduction. Richard Moon, I've lived here in the Jamestown area for about 30 years, and I grew up in Buffalo. Went to school in downtown Buffalo at Hutch Tech. I graduated from the University of Buffalo with a pharmacy degree in the mid-'80s. I got a doctorate from a Bernard Dunn School in Virginia in early 2000s. I opened up Pharmacy Innovations in the early 90s, and we've grown into a national mini chain of compounding-centric pharmacies. We've got about 70 or 80 employees around the country. We do a bunch of fun stuff. And in my time here, I've raised two wonderful children, both great daughters, and they've done nicely for themselves, but they left the area, part of the reason I'm running, right? And to try to bring more jobs and opportunities and keep that brain drain from going away. And we have, like I say, grown to a national company, and I've been fortunate enough to meet some really talented people along the way. I've done some karate and judo. I still teach in the area. And before moving here, I lived in Olean, Wellsville, worked in Wellsville area. So we've gotten around, and I'd like to give some of that back. I think I've done as much as I can from this side of the aisle, if you will. I volunteered on a national level, on a local level with, like you say, the Zoning Board of Appeals and ad hoc zoning committees and volunteer swim coach and all the fun stuff. But with pharmacy, I've been very involved politically and trying to keep the profession and grow it. So again, now it's time to try to do something from the other side of the aisle. Yeah. I believe this area, we've had some really good people be our representatives, but we've been a little underserved on the vocality, the ability for these folks to be able to, project a positive image for the southern tier in Western New York, and I'd like to change that a little bit in an adult manner, right? I don't need to throw stones or call anybody bad names, but I know that I've got a plan to bring some jobs and some positive image to our area and highlight what we really have for the rest of the world. It's kind of funny, and I'll tell people, and they say, oh, you're from Buffalo or Western New York, and they're like, oh, that's terrible. I go, you keep thinking that. Don't come here, right? Those of you guys that really want to know what we're like and what we have here, come on by. We'll show you a really good time. We have a great area, but still seeing that negative connotation out there for Western New York and the Finger Lakes just is unfortunate, So yeah. I mean, I joke about don't come here, but it's always a lead in to say, come on, we've got some really good stuff here, and not enough people know about it. And I think I can do a good job from Washington with protecting our rights and still growing our local area.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you do bring up, is in many cases there is this negative connotation to not just Western New York, but many Rust Belt areas where you see people fleeing to places like Florida, for example. That's a really popular place where I know a lot of people who I graduated with high school with. They've now been living down there for several years, and you look at that and you look at that mindset. How do we really begin to change that? Does it start with the people and lead into opportunities? Because I know you starting your own business in Western New York, growing it to a nationwide chain, that's impressive when you look at the scale of how many obstacles there are in the way for self-starters.
Yeah, government obstacles are really key, and they hurt an awful lot of people. They never teach you that you're going to run into that, right? So how do you get in the way of that? Partly is working to overcome some of those obstacles. Providing some of the tools for people to be able to do that. And there are some tools out there, but they're not very well known or they're not easily accessible. B is to reduce a lot of the overhead and the problems that the government causes for getting in the way. And if you realize how many three-letter agencies get in the way of trying to do something, it's mind-boggling. I mean, as you can imagine in the pharmacy business, we've got the DEA, the FDA, the Department of Health, the Board of Pharmacy, the Department of Environmental Conservation, the state DEC. There's just so many, and it becomes a nightmare. So reducing some of that burden in a safe, ethical, responsible, environmental way is key. Access to good employees, good infrastructure, the ability to be able to have folks in town or associated businesses help get your word out and work together as a team and network, and all of those things are important. And if you lose people to Florida, you know, it's a brain drain. That's a thing that goes away. It's very difficult to get back. You know, our young students are leaving all the time. Both my daughters went to school in the area, one at Allegheny College, one at RIT, and they both got master's degrees in their respective fields, but one lives in Orlando, like Florida, you know, and the other one's right now in Boston. So those are intelligent people that have no desire to come back. So we need to keep some of those people here and provide them opportunities that are available. We just got to peel back some of the layers and look at where those opportunities are.
As congressman, if elected, how would you work to try to bridge that gap?
So part of it is information, right? Part of it, I mean, there's a lot of bacon that gets brought back and all the kind of pork stuff they got, but I think it can be done very simply, economically, with the right attitude and effort. I mean, without giving away a program of how I would do it, I think I would take a different approach. One thing is a pharmacy compounding individual. We make stuff from scratch for people. We solve individual problems with an approach that isn't a algorithm that's given to us by somebody else. And that taking that kind of mentality and try to pull the rest of the things we do together, that's the way I'll approach those issues. So not necessarily with trying to just funnel government money and programs, but being able to use the tools that we have in place to make sure that they go well. You know, and we've done this. I'm opening up another business here in Jamestown that's not pharmacy, and hopefully it'll be open this fall. But that'll be kind of an example of pulling things together that maybe somebody hadn't quite thought of in a manner, and accomplishing hopefully some good jobs for some good people in that way.
I know we've heard from other candidates in the past who have been elected, who haven't been elected, and that's one of the big points they say is, well, let's help each other as neighbors, right? One thing could lead to another, and you look over the last 2 years with COVID, the federal government has dumped billions, trillions of dollars into many of these programs to try to lead to that effort. How would your approach be different in that sense of trying to infiltrate a community to spur some sort of development?
So I think a career politician's natural tendency is to take money from the taxpayers and put it in a program and it'll make it all better, right? But for somebody who's never really signed the front of a paycheck or earned that money to sign the front of a paycheck, it's impossible to understand what it takes to actually make it work. So sure, the PPP and the loans, they help float some people to get them through, but nobody ever took a look at the root causes of what happened, and when you look at what Donald Trump said, right, he goes, we have to make sure that the cure isn't worse than the disease. And there's some logic to that from a survival point of view. So is there one answer that does it all? No. Is the government throwing $6 trillion at the problem and creating a whole bureaucracy the answer? I mean, it's part of a solution, but it's not really the answer. The answer is really to take every sector and make them do what they do best. Allow them to do what they do best. In some cases we handicapped some sectors from doing things. In other cases we allowed people to do things that they hadn't done before. For instance, as a pharmacy, we're not allowed to make OTC items, over-the-counter available items, but the FDA allowed us to make hand sanitizer because there was a really big need for it that wasn't met until the folks can ramp up. So things like that, getting government out of the way in some cases is as effective as throwing money at it. I mean, it didn't cost a dime for the FDA to say, go ahead, pharmacies, make some sanitizer, or go ahead, distilleries, make some sanitizer. That didn't cost the government anything, but yet it solved a problem. So there are a number of ways to look at it, but again, I think when you get career politicians, their natural tendency is to think with somebody else's money. And that we have to try to solve problems and we've got the greatest economic approach in the world, in the history of time. let's use that. Let's allow people to do that. You certainly want to keep unethical people out of the equation, but there's a way to do that too, So I'm pretty confident that if government allowed people, it's supposed to be a freedom of the people, but sometimes, like I said, the government's got a handicap on you. If the government gets out of the way on a lot of things, it could work a lot better.
Yeah, it's almost like you need that balance between having government regulation and allowing a free market, because both have consequences on each side.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you don't want, hazardous waste companies dumping into the water. Absolutely. So there is a balance. Without some government, we wouldn't have the cars as safe as we are. The coal mines wouldn't be as safe as they are. So there are a lot of things that the government, but there are also a lot of things that the government, or some people in the government, want the government to do that just really shouldn't be done.
And one important point I think that you brought up was during the pandemic, there was a lot of this entrepreneurship that came forward. And I know just a few weeks ago, Governor Hochul announced that she's going to be revisiting here in New York some of the old laws that were put down during Prohibition about to-go alcohol drinks. And I know that's a much different sector than yours, but when you look at it, do you feel that coming into, say, healthcare specifically from your background, there are laws out there that Congress should revisit that are 100-plus-year-old that maybe could be different, could be changed?
So that answer is absolutely. There's a couple of specific ones that we maybe can get to in another time that are hindering the development and entrepreneurship of a number of folks that aren't mega corporations. They definitely favor mega corporations. Yeah.
So that outsider, that business perspective then that you're trying to bring to Congress, to Washington, a lot of people, and you mentioned him earlier in the interview, associate that with former President Trump. And we talked before we got on camera just about how divisive the world is today, I think more than ever.
Right.
You talk about gas prices, and immediately it strugs on the emotions of the current administration, and a lot of times you can tell who's on what side based on what they're talking about. For you, where do you align with the former president? And do you try to differentiate yourself from him at all?
So yeah, it's a danger in this society, right? If you say, listen, I like the economic policies of President Trump. They helped an awful lot of people. All of a sudden you're a Trumper, right? I mean, I don't know what a Trumper really is. I mean, the principles that Donald Trump brought to office, I espoused 20 years ago. So is Trump a richer? I mean, is he following me? That's kind of egotistical. But I mean, I don't know what a Trumper is. And certainly, if you liked what Obama did, I mean, are you an Obama-er? I mean, yeah, kind of tagging somebody with all that, that's really unfortunate in the way things are nowadays. But no, I do like some of the economic policies. I mean, honestly, the gentleman says some things I probably never would say. I mean, I feel like I'm an adult about a lot of situations, and when I do use Twitter, I try to, put stuff out that helps people. I mean, I don't know what the right answer is and what people want to see, but I know that I don't like to behave like that. But he's not unique in that regard. There are an awful lot of people in politics who throw mud.
Right.
And I don't know that it needs to be done.
Right. And that's such a hard thing to try to get through today. I know Congressman Tom Reed, who you would be seeking to fill his position, he has worked on the Problem Solvers Caucus for a number of years to try to break through some of that divide in Washington, which I think is what turns off a lot of people, where they say they don't want to get involved in politics because they don't want to deal with that. They don't want to see that because there's all these promises made, but they're never capped.
Yeah.
For you, how do you address that with potential voters where your stance might be different?
I'm going to do the best that I can. I know that I can do some really good things. My focus is going to be on this district, right? I mean, I definitely believe in a border security and a good, strong economy and free market principles and all the rest of those things, and lower taxation, the confiscation of money. That's what taxation is. All of those things are important, and I'll work as much as I can in that. But there are 435 Congress people, right, and 100 people in the Senate. So realistically, being one voice out of many, if we can rise above the quiet and at least be recognized for some of that stuff, that'd be great. But I absolutely plan on spending my time bettering this district You're making it better for the farmers, the wine growers, the smaller industry guys, the sheet metal guys, the metal shop folks. And you mentioned alcohol a little bit.
Right.
I'm actually opening a distillery, so that's not that far off the mark.
No.
So I think there is a focus in help making those and making the government, the federal government, work for that, right? So there's those national issues that are very important, and I'll do everything I can to draw the light on it. But there's some very fine people doing that a lot already. I can support that. I can come up. I've got a couple maybe unique ideas. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're things they've already talked about and thrown out. I don't know yet. But I know that I want to work for the folks here, and I think it's a great opportunity to have somebody that lives here, that grew up here, whose family is in this area. Like I said, I used to work for Phase Drugs when they were a thing. I might be a little bit before your time, but my wife at the time and I moved down to Olean and worked in Wellsville and lived in a town called Hinsdale, right? So we've been around, and this area has been my home, and I want to see the people here be able to do better.
Yeah, and advocating, I know, is a really big thing that a lot of people want to see in Washington.
Yeah.
Because many times in Western New York, we have been forgotten, and whether that's on a state level or even at a national level. And we've seen traction, especially with the latest package that came from Washington to help with COVID relief. So that's something that folks here could count on you to continue that torch.
Absolutely, and like I say, getting rid of things that get in our way.
Yeah.
One of my black belt friends is a retired military gentleman, a great guy. So having those guys run into the headaches that they do to get benefits and services is important. Making sure that we're there to allow businesses and families succeed, folks that need help, because the government's a daunting task. If you can imagine somebody that's not internet savvy, and we don't think about those people who aren't internet savvy because we've got it in our pocket, right? I mean, we just pull it out while we're driving. Unfortunately, I think some people do it, but there are still an awful lot of people that. And sometimes I'm guilty of that. I mean, I just, what do I got to press here, Mm-hmm. So there's still a lot of services, a lot of things that people can be helped with from the government, both state and federal, and that can be a good thing without having to be the one guy that changes immigration policy, right? It doesn't all have to be about hitting that home run, right? So, and the other thing too that I think that can be done, I mean, with Lee Zeldin running as the Republican nominee and a couple other pretty talented people running on the right side of the ticket, and hopefully there'll be somebody else on the left side of the ticket to keep the current governor honest in their approach to what they do. But I think that the Congressional Caucus might be able to do more for the state as well, right? We don't see much come in the public eye, and behind the scenes there's always talk and there's always this and there's that, but there's got to be some more public that can be done. One of the things that broke my heart was when Remington left. I mean, we had a viable business that's 100 years old. The former governor said, if you're not in favor of abortions and you're against guns, we don't want you in New York. I'm like, I don't know if you can dig that quote up, but I was like, the guy just told me to move. Right. That's what I'm fighting against also. I mean, this idea that we're just such a homogenous thing that we're just lemmings following somebody off a cliff. We want to have people that can succeed in the area, grow their businesses, keep good jobs here, and not chase them out to Alabama.
Congressional Candidate Robert Moon joining us in
Rich.
studio. Rich Moon, I'm sorry, joining us in the studio today. Sir, thank you very much for your time. And finally, I wanted to kind of talk about some current affairs. I know Ukraine and the gas prices are really big for a lot of folks as it's hurting their wallet today. What would you do? First of all, I want to get your take of the situation. And then what maybe you or other congressional leaders, and I know this situation will probably be resolved by then, I would imagine.
Hope so.
But what could you do as a congressperson to prevent this from happening in the future?
So I think as a collective, there does need to be a leader that gets behind an idea. Right now, we're pointing fingers at everybody. It's his fault, it's their fault, it's this fault. It happened 3 years ago. I mean, not having the briefings that they do, because clearly I hope they know more than I do. But this whole thing has been going on for 3 years, right? I mean, it's been almost a de facto world war for 3 years, whether it's shutting down our pipeline in North Carolina or whether it's, malware or whatever. I mean, we've been this global tug of war, and this is just another step in that. Unfortunately, I mean, you can go to Wikipedia and look up a bit about the Ukrainian gas line, right? And the fact that in Ukraine, they siphoned gas off a few years ago because it was really cold, and the Russians caught them, and they had a fight about it, and they're paying them back, and this and that. So, I mean, there's way, way, way more that's going on other than what you're seeing on the news and the repeating 1-hour segments.
Right.
So what can you do? I mean, you can appeal to the better sense of people. I think that and I'll tell you one thing I did like about this whole event, but the Russian people are pretty much, against it. I think the pressure will come to bear. I hope that China takes a look at that and decides, discretion is the better part of action as far as, their neighbor across the sea. And then the one thing I was encouraged about that I don't know that I expected, but maybe somebody better briefed mine of, was that, Anonymous or the hackers or these guys all kind of attacked this big state, right? And said, we're not going to sit and take this lying down. So the people of the world really are uniting over this atrocity, right? I did throw a tweet out there, and you can look at it. I said, never thought in my lifetime we'd see this again. And it's really sad, and it's had made me sad over the couple of days. So the sooner it stops, the better. And a positive resolution, I think, would be good. But the one thing I don't want to happen is what happened after World War I, where we punished Germany so bad that they felt that they had to come back stronger and start World War II. Right? I mean, I think that, if we don't look at the historical part of the things that have happened, we're in danger of repeating that. Because everybody wants sanctions, and the people get hurt by sanctions. You don't want that rebound effect. You want to be able to manage it.
Right, and both people, on both Russian and Americans now today, President Biden announcing he's going to take further action to stop oil coming out of Russia. And the gas prices are already well over $4. There was a viewer who told me that he saw it was $4.50 in Falconer.
I took a picture of the pump when I got my gas the other day, and I put it on Twitter, and I had to take it off because I had a couple typos in it. I don't know if you've ever noticed that if you make a typo on Twitter, you're done.
Right.
Right? And that's really easy to do on the phone, so I took it down. But yeah, the super unleaded was $4.59.
Right.
I think that there's a certain segment that wants that so they can push the green energy. But I also think those guys forget that it takes diesel fuel, big old trucks to dig out of the earth, mining lithium and mining all of those elements. And, then there's disposal issues, those big windmills from GE. Those got to be buried. They don't degrade. So there's a whole lot of issues with all of those. And there's not, again, one solution. There's got to be, a meeting together of all of those things and gets the best ROI with the best safety factor. It's not just AOC saying we want them to have smart buildings by next year or whatever the time she picked was. There's got to be a way to have everybody function. And again, if you go and look at the market economy and let the market economy work to your advantage, that will help. It's not something to swim upstream against. You work with it.
Finally, is there anything you want the voter to take away from you if they're watching this segment and you have one thing they want to take away about your campaign for Congress, that would be?
I appreciate that. We haven't really started a marketing or a media blitz. That we've been kind of taking it low key and have watched the events in our district. And my opponent's done a good job of getting some recommendations and such, but I believe that somebody who lives in this community, that has grown up in the area, has kids raised here and left, knows better and knows what we need and can work, I think, better than somebody that's commuting into our district. I know that I'll work hard. I know my friends and neighbors. I've taken care of thousands of people in these counties between hospice care and nursing home care and just their kids. I took care of some of their kids, right? We've been in business for 30 years, so it's fun to see their names in the paper. I know that I can do a better job for this area than anybody else that's running at this point in time. And I don't have any intention on making it a 20-year career in Washington. I'll go do my job for a few years and then let somebody else that has new ideas and a new energy come in and do it as well.
All right, Richard Moon, a candidate for New York's 23rd Congressional District. We appreciate you very much for joining us today here on WNY News Now. And of course, complete election coverage online all the time at WNYNewsNow.com and on our free mobile app.
Thank you very much for having me.